Welcome to Texans On Tap, episode 23. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. You can follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. There are still a ton of you that are watching our content on YouTube that have not subscribed, and you know who you are, and we invite you to do so right now. It costs you nothing, and it really does help us with reach. So please subscribe on YouTube. And if you prefer listening to your podcast, every episode of Texans on Tap is available on your favorite podcast app. Our preview episodes drop there early on podcast. And on those preview episodes, I asked Josh and Charlie for their score predictions, and these guys have been scary close over the past few weeks. Charlie went 2017 Texans, and Josh, you went 24-17 Texans. Score ends up being 22-17, so Josh goes to the Showcase Showdown this week. Texans eke out yet another nail-biter, their 8th close game in a row, but it comes with a heavy price, and we'll touch on that a little later. The theme of this week, though, was Houston's defense, culminating in a game-saving pick in the end zone on Denver's final drive. Will Anderson, Derek Stingley have balled out. Charlie, is this more in line with what you thought you'd see from a healthy Texans defense?
Well, look, this was the ideal. The two tentpole players on this defense supposed to be the 3rd overall pick in the draft and the 3rd overall pick in the draft in consecutive years. Stingley, the football maxim, you can't make the club from the tub. Well, there was never any jeopardy of him making the club, but injury issues that submarined his final years at LSU, ravaged his rookie season with the Texans, disrupted the first half of this season with the Texans. The concern was real. And not that he's earned Iron Man stripes yet, but played every snap defensively in the game. And without Stingley, obviously, the Texans do not win the game yesterday. The athleticism on both of the interceptions. The first one, after Will Anderson, I don't know if he didn't clip his fingernails, but if not, good job, Will. Just gets enough to redirect the ball a little bit, but then Stingley has to twist his body a little bit to reach back, make that play, and secure the pick. And then the second one, maybe Russell Wilson underthrew that ball just a hair, but it wasn't a bad underthrow. And for Stingley to cut inside, there's a saying about defensive backs, they play in the secondary because they can't catch. Well, Derek Stingley would be quite a wide receiver also. Unfortunately, the Texans could have a use for him, but I'm not recommending two-way play yet for Derek Stingley, but he was spectacular, as was Anderson.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Steven Nelson, because Russell Wilson didn't want to try him that much. That's why they were going after Stingley a little bit, and Stingley made him pay. But this is what we've been waiting for. With Derek Stingley, he's a good player. It's just been the injury stuff, like Charlie talked about, that's been the issue. And with Will Anderson, that was a impressive breakout performance. I took some notes during the game, and immediately I'm writing, was the trade worth it now with Will Anderson? It sure looks like it was. He's playing out of his mind. 4 QB hits. Gernard also added a sack. So just nice to see. They're really good on 3rd down as well. So it's nice to see him get some pressure. That's something they've struggled with most of the season, but it looks like it's starting to come around.
Yeah, they had the one nagging issue defensively. Virtually every game, they get beaten deep, but it was a combo of safeties in Ward and Pitre. And again, Courtland Sutton's a really good wide receiver. Sometimes you're just going to get got. But now that we're talking about a playoff team against better competition where your margin for error will be smaller to begin with, getting beat so consistently over top's a problem. Though Jimmy Ward did get the last laugh relative to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, he did.
And Petrie did get beat and got completely bailed out by Stingley cutting over the middle and because he bit hard on that double move by Sutton. Unless you guys have any more thoughts on defense, I wanted to get over to offense because I feel like it's one of the big headlines.
Well, quickly, I'll just say Tavier Thomas benched. He didn't play. That was Desmond King that took over and the nickel. So that's pretty amazing because he really struggled that game. And then, they cut Shaq Griffin this week as well. And then Desmond King comes out and has a hell of a game. And really, he should have had a touchdown. That was a terrible call by the official. This game should not have been as close as it was.
No, for several reasons. One is that, but then also some missed opportunities by CJ kind of throwing downfield, and a couple easy opportunities in which he overthrew guys. It was kind of a mixed bag for him because he had some amazing plays. There was the throw across his body where he kind of throws off his heels when the offensive line broke down, when protection broke down. Like I mentioned, he like overthrew some really easy opportunities, some big drops by receivers. And obviously one of the big headlines that you guys can talk about here, which was Tank Dell going down. How do you guys grade CJ in this game going against that Broncos defense?
Well, as you noted, a very mixed bag. His QBR was terrible for the game. He missed a number of throws, but when he did not have nearly his A game, he put the ball on the ground once, but not for a turnover, against a Broncos team that during its 5-game winning streak had been a takeaway machine. The Texans, 0 turnovers, right? Stroud, a pickless game. He had that little pocket where he had issues with interceptions, but he's still sitting on just 5 for the season, 12 games in. And to win the turnover battle, 3-0 over Denver in a 1-score game, the offense has been okay 3 weeks in a row now, 21, 22, 21 points. So they're due a big breakout. The Jets that we'll get to in episode 24 will pose a challenge there, but at least don't do the things that can lose the game. And given Denver short fields because of turnovers, still too many penalties. But overall, I'd go B against a Broncos defense that had been shutting people down. And in one game, you don't want to get carried away. But the Broncos held the Chiefs to 9 points in a game 5-6 weeks ago. And so the Texans got to 22 and enough to win.
Yeah, I'd give CJ a B. It was tough because he lost Tank Dell, which was huge. We'll get into that in a little bit. It was all about Nico Collins. I looked at the snap rates here. Robert Woods only played 47% of the snaps, and that was in a game where Tank Dell got hurt and left. He had 0 catches. Noah Brown had a bad drop. He played over 80% of the snaps. He had 0 catches. I mean, your second leading receiver was Brevin Jordan behind Nico Collins. So, which was nice to see him break out because the last 2 games for Dalton Schultz, he didn't do really anything. So nice to see the tight ends getting going, and you'll take that there. But it's kind of looking bad as far as weapons for CJ. You got to have more than that. You can't have 2 out of your main 3 receivers have 0 catches. I'm sure that's something they'll work on this week.
Yeah, unless you're running the triple option, I wonder what the winning percentage for teams where one wide receiver has more than 1 reception in the game. Collins was a monster, though. 2 long plays, 9 for 191. He's within 9 yards of a 1,000-yard receiving season. He's on pace for 1,400 yards. You do get the extra game in the schedule. Nevertheless, only Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins have gotten anywhere near that kind of level that Nico Collins is playing at now. I think he is homing in on a Pro Bowl spot. The run game, I didn't like the split of carries. Pierce had the 1 break run early, 22 yards, I think. His other 14 carries, he totaled 19 yards. Singletary is their better rusher right now and should be getting the greater percentage of carries. Not that he had a big game, but as we talked about some last week, well, maybe if you're not giving him a chance to get in his rhythm and get that burst play or two, we have 8 carries for 27 yards. So, look, this is just a lousy run team. They're going to have to throw, and then throw some more. But that loss of Tank Dell, it's a huge blow because you would think going forward, defenses can really load up on Nico Collins. So whether Noah Brown refines his rhythm, they're going to need another weapon in that pass game beyond Collins. And, on Dell, as we get to that, it's easy to say after the fact. But a guy who doesn't outweigh me by very much. Freak injuries happen. Football's a violent sport, but boy, a little guy to be in all that traffic on a run play. If you want him as a decoy, but he wasn't, right? All 3 receivers on that right side were coming to the inside, and Dell gets rolled up, and what had been a fantastic rookie season is now over.
Yeah, that bothered me in the moment. I was just like, why is he there? What are you doing? I know it's football and they ask these guys to block, but you have to know the size of this guy. And he's a feisty dude. He's going to want to get in there and prove himself. So you got to, sometimes coaching is about saving players from themselves. So I just, to me, the risk reward there, putting him in that mess. And Dameon Pierce, he doesn't really look where he's going. I mean, early in the game, he crashed into Nico Collins. I was worried that he was going to hurt Nico. And then, he pounds in there, and he's probably part of the reason why Tank got rolled up. So that was disappointing to me. And to Charlie's point, Singletary, 4.5 yards per rush, but he only got 8 carries in the game with Pierce getting 15 carries and getting 2.7 yards per rush. So Singletary's got to get more time here. And who knows, Dameon Pierce might get some more guys hurt. He's got to pay attention where he's going.
There's a little bit of a second guess, I suppose, to the Dell thing. But just as you wouldn't ask a scat back running back to block the other team's monster edge pass rusher, why do you have a 5'9", whatever Dell's true height is, 165-pound guy in there? Even if he's supposed to just get a little piece of a corner or safety, he's in where all those big bodies are. And, well, the worst outcome possible for the Texans happened.
And I've said this before. I don't know how differently we would think of Bobby Slowick if CJ Stroud were the generational talent that he is. And he didn't do anything to make any fans yesterday, especially, again, like that decision to have Tank Dell. Charlie, you mentioned it. If you got him out there as a decoy, that's one thing. But inside blocking on a goal line play, it seemed questionable even in the moment. He's even, going to Ogunbowale to try to, find some semblance of a run game. We were 13 weeks into the season. Are you still surprised to see the Texans running game continue to be so anemic under Bobby Slowick, who is a branch from that Shanahan tree?
No, because we're 2/3 of the way through the season, a little beyond. And the broken record keeps spinning. Singletary had the 2 huge games a month or so ago, but both before and after, the run game has been effete. I don't think you want to try to turn C.J. Stroud into Michael Vick with design run plays, but for him to pull it down occasionally as a run threat and when you need a first down. The Texans were horrible on third down in the game, 4 for 16, but they were awesome compared to Denver, 0 for 11 for the Broncos. Yet oddly, the 2 teams between them were 4 for 4 converting fourth downs. Just a very quirky numerical parlay there. But no, the Texans can't run the ball against a team with any sort of run defense. I'm not saying you never run the ball, but when I'm going to run the ball, I'm going to do so with my better back of my 2 more often than not.
Yeah, and if they couldn't do it against the Broncos, they are dead last in rushing yards against per game. They average giving up about 150 yards per game throughout the whole season. I know their season's been kind of up and down. I get all that, but just overall, if the Texans couldn't run against them, they're probably not going to be able to run against anybody. And Singletary did have 2 games where he went over 100, and then he somehow kind of lost the job. It's kind of curious decision there.
We've danced around it a little bit, touched on it here and there. Let's get into it. Tank Dell's injury on that goal line, blocking for that goal line touchdown. We'll get into a more granular breakdown in the Jets preview, but what does this do big picture wise? Because CJ's lost one of his big targets. He loves him, especially in that kind of intermediate, middle part of the field. What did they look at? I mean, I know when Dell went down earlier with that concussion during the season, we saw Dalton Schultz get a lot of catches in the middle of the field, kind of replacing some of those catches. Where do the Texans go from here with the absence of Tank Dell?
Well, a little further opportunity knocks for John Mechie. But while I'm not saying that Tank Dell was going to become Tyreek Hill, within the Texans offense, he was their Tyreek Hill, the guy who teams know they had to worry about blowing off the top of the defense. Right? When that guy goes on a fly pattern, it's going to get a safety's attention in addition to the cornerback on Dell's side of the field. And, that's speed threat that's just not on the roster. The Texans have a competent core of wide receivers, but they now just do not have a burner, right? Among Collins and Brown and Mechie and Woods, there is no Tank Dell there. And that's why Tank Dell was making the run at, rookie numbers that Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins didn't put up with the Texans. And Stroud's ability to throw that deep ball, their rhythm from when they were, drafted, and Stroud said, hey, I'm going to do all I can to make sure they draft you a couple rounds from now. So it really is a shame. All teams have their injuries to overcome. And, there obviously are other players on the Texans that you'd give a bigger uh-oh to if they lost than Tank Dell. But I don't think we need a second hand to count those guys. So for a little third round wide receiver, it's a huge blow. Huge blow.
Yeah, they lost their best playmaker, bottom line. There's no way around it. And Nico is going to get a lot more attention now, like Charlie mentioned before. So that's going to be an issue. The other thing, Nico's a guy that kind of has to build up to get his speed. Tank's a guy that can win right away. You think to that Buccaneers game when CJ just went boom, boom, boom down the field, most of those throws to Tank. So, yeah, it's a big loss. You got to get something out of Mechie. I think he only had one catch in this past game. So they got to find somebody else. So Noah Brown has kind of been that guy, but he's been injured and he just came back. So I got to think it's mostly going to be him, especially with Robert Woods not playing a whole lot of snaps this week.
Tank missed 2 games with concussion. But by the way, we had a CJ Stroud concussion scare during this game as well. How much does Tank's size kind of play into this? We've talked about this narrative about him being smaller stature, smaller build guy, and now here he is. He had already missed 2 games with concussion. Now is going to miss with a season-ending leg break here. Look, Charlie, you said it. It's football. It's a big boy sport. Injuries happen. A lot of other injuries have happened on this team as well. Derek Stingley can speak well to that, and he's as big as they come as far as defensive backs go. But how much will this play into that narrative of Tank Dell is just too slight of build to stay healthy at the pro level?
It's a clear and present danger that unfortunately has now manifested itself in a season-ending form. Now, concussion, anyone's head can get banged off the turf or hit someone's knee or a helmet. But just in terms of frame, right? Tank Dell were 5'11", 190. He'd have been a first-round pick, but he's not. He's 165 pounds, and maybe that's in uniform. So, his bones are more twigs or branches than trunks, right? Andre Johnson, just about the physical prototype for a wide receiver. Tank Dell would look like his little brother tagging along to the playground. Hey, can I play? So Dell can be a huge weapon, but I don't think he can ever be that monster, heavy-duty, 90, 100 catch type wide receiver season in, season out, because he's just more likely to get hurt.
Yeah, I think this means in the offseason, they can't just count on him coming back and being healthy going forward. They're gonna have to do something. They got to get some speed. That's the element that he brings. Mechie wasn't, a burner coming out. We know Noah Brown's not really that guy, and Nico's kind of a build-up speed, big target receiver. So they need somebody that's shifty like Tank Dell. So through free agency or the draft, I think they're going to have to address that again.
This is a lot easier to play this game after a win, and I think there are a lot of candidates to choose from this week. Who is your player of the game?
Josh, you want offense or defense? We have elite candidates both ways, so...
I'll probably go defense.
Well, then it's clearly Nico Collins. You lose Dell, 9 catches, 181 yards, 2 of them huge gains, when already the number 1 bulk wide receiver option when in the game. And Dell goes down. Collins then becomes priority 1 defensively in the pass game. So to hang that number on the board, within 1 more average for the game reception of going for 2 bills, Nico Collins, my Texan of the week.
Yeah, I got a couple good options here, but I'm going to go Will Anderson. Will Anderson Jr. was just putting pressure on Russell Wilson all day long, and he was coming up big. And he was so explosive. He looked more explosive to me coming off the ball in this game. He was really quickly getting in there and causing disruption. So way to go, Will Anderson. I'll go with him.
And the Broncos had been a takeaway machine during their winning streak, and the Texans gave it up 0 times. Conversely, Russell Wilson, paltry numbers, but turnover proof during that 5-game winning streak, 0 interceptions, and the Texans pick him off. The 2 great plays by Stingley and then Ward on a ball that was really just thrown up for grabs, desperation spot there. But to pick off Wilson 3 times in the last quarter and a minute of the game, +3 in the turnovers, +5 on the scoreboard. And respect to Jim Mora, we're talking playoffs.
Yeah, and I'll go Stingley as well. 2 interceptions. You mentioned 4 over his last 3 games. We wondered what he would look like, and I think a lot of people just kind of discount the fact that he's playing in a new system as well, in addition to kind of trying to come back from injury. So good job with Stingley. I think that really bodes well, especially considering the breakout games that both he and Anderson Jr. had. And I think that's going to do it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We're going to do an early look at Texans Jets in tomorrow's episode. And as always, you can catch that episode early on podcast. So go give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, those links are in the description. Thanks for listening. As always, go Texans.